This is extremely important for the diaspora because those who come behind us must be faithful. They must get the strength to stand firm into their beliefs. They must understand their foundation and they must understand their own reference point. So it is very, in my opinion, to provide the means of preserving the culture, fostering a unity of core values and reference points that empower those who come behind us.
This is a wonderful topic today. Stories can shape the future of the African diaspora and play a vital role in healing and transformation. There's an enduring power of narratives. Stories are the threads that weave the fabric of our identity. And for those in the African diaspora, our narratives are often fragmented, scattered across continents, and buried under the weight of history. But when we come together to share, we begin a collective narrative, one that transcends borders and time.
It is important that when we are talking of, because for somebody that is hearing you talk about ancestral healing for the first time, that individual might sort of be frightened, because of course that is how we have been educated to be scared of who we are, to be scared of our tradition, our belief system and all of that. But what a shame. We should never be ashamed of who we are, because connected to the ancestors is saying connected to your father, connected to your mother. Any tradition, any belief system, any education that teaches you to hate that channel is the institution of an oppressor. Hello, and thank you for checking out this video. I'm Obehi Ewanfoh, the host of the African Diaspora Storytelling Series. Every 2 weeks, we meet up on LinkedIn to talk about different ways we can leverage the power of storytelling as people of African descent. Now, this is it. We are uniting the millions of Africans in the diaspora through the power of our story. If that sounds like what you are interested in, make sure to subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends who might need it. Now, back to today's conversation. Building collective narrative with our story. And I think this should really resound among us as people of African descent, because we are looking at how do we build our collective narrative, because our narrative now comes to shape how we see ourselves and also how other people see us. Why not? It's on us to determine how we see ourselves in the world and also how other people see us. So this is important for us, and it's part of our intentionality in that we are not just waiting for fortune or time or some chances for us to be represented. We are choosing how we want to represent ourselves, and we are using our story as an instrument for us to be able to stand out in the crowd. We know who we are. This is what it means. And we are using that our experiences, those things that have happened to us, to explain that we are here present. That is important. You see, I was researching a couple of weeks ago now, I think, because we are talking about storytelling all the time, we are talking about how do we stand out in the competition in the name of our story. And because we are talking about human being, so I was asking myself, but how many people have actually been here in this experience that we call life? According to the statistics, there have been about 170 billion people that have walked the surface of the earth. That includes, of course, the 8 billion people that are currently living today. And when I take down that statistics, the message that comes to my mind keeps striking me very hard is that none of this person has been a mistake. All these people that have lived, none of them have been a mistake. Each of them have been unique, meaning we have our unique experiences, our story. But unfortunately, many people will disappear the same way that they show up without a trace. And I think we should never allow that to happen because we are not a mistake. Therefore, we should not just disappear like that. By disappearing without a trace, it means that when you fade away, because that is what happened to us. When we die, after a few years, our memory fade away, except maybe we have done something that make that memory continue to be in the mind of the people. Because we live in the memory of the people. Therefore, our experiences, how we influence other people, because those are the people that we make mention of us. And by making mention of us, because we have name, that name is an evocation of who we are. By the time they make mention of our name, therefore we are alive again. Just like when we make mention of Marcus Garvey, anytime we make mention of Marcus Garvey is alive. Because there is something particular about names. So I think our collective narrative is important that we learn how to use it to build up who we are. All right, so let me start with Madam Yemi. So Yemi, what is going to be your first take here? And please let the people know who you are. I think this conversation is really hot from the way I see it. Please go.
Thank you, Obehi. Thank you for having me. Thank you, our beautiful audience. Basically, I'm a life coach to women 40 plus, managing relationship loss and surviving widows who have navigated to a certain point and are now ready to review and look at what they want for the future. And I also run workshops on coaching on so many issues that we cover and make us survive as individuals, especially when we get to the age 40 plus, because we've tasted life. Thank you for the opportunity again, Obehi, to speak. And I was reflecting on this topic and I kept on reading it, saying building collective narratives with our stories. And my take on this today, briefly, is I was this morning, on a Monday, I go walking with a group. What came to mind when people were sharing, as this was a maybe 2 hour walk, people were sharing their stories. And we know the stories of the diaspora have an element of resilience, survival, strength. And yes, there's a lot of pain and trauma as well. However, when we were there was around 10 or 9 women and a couple of men. But what came to me is this is a collective. Then someone said something about she was looking to open to start a reading club. But from that, people were asking different questions. And I said, it's an opportunity to share our stories. So from that was quite inspiring. So from leaving that walk today, I came home and wrote these 3. Well, I've written quite a few points, but the 3 points I want to touch on today is number 1, building community. Because when you build a community that can identify, you've already created an opportunity for stories to be told. Verbally, in written form, you've created a forum of expression. So it's very important wherever we go and we identify as a community of the diaspora. What you find in a lot of countries is, especially, well, I'm not going to, in a lot of countries, is sometimes people of the diaspora were made unconscious to feel we need to be invisible. And invisibility can take the form of identifying perhaps with the host participants of that country and denying your visibility with the person that is similar in sight to you or in color because of the expectation of your setting. So we need to build community. That means identifying, there's nothing wrong in identifying wherever you are, people who form that community. But number 1, building community that enables expression. And number 2, when we build communities, it's also, even when we want to express our stories, it requires 3 major elements, which is preparation. So, for example, even when we were talking today on the walk, you find people were talking about different things where they'd given speeches about coming from the wherever, the Caribbean, West Africa, whatever. But when the lady was speaking, she was sharing something about doing a big presentation to a large room. The presentation went okay, but when people started to ask questions, there was a bit of emotional triggers because sometimes we think we're prepared to share our stories, but we haven't actually done the therapeutic work. So we become emotionally vulnerable, and that can trigger greater things that can lead to something else. Number 2, so the preparation is important. Number 2, to successfully share your story, you need to have set this is my coach hat on now, set goals and timelines. So you could have a collective community. We could all be sharing our stories. But what is the vision? What is the timeline? How are we going to express it? Are we going to write it as journals and then combine it into a book? Or are we going to have a group where we all meet on Zoom and share it as a podcast? So they have to, and then you can tell all the stories, but you need to have a deadline. And number three, audience conscience. You have to be focused. Who is your audience when you're sharing this story? What's the age? Is it for the whole world, or is it for your own community, or is it legacy to be archived for our children? So that's where I'm at the moment. Pass it back to you, Obi.
Thank you so much for that, Yemi. Those are really key points. Those are really key and fundamental points about storytelling and why we have to be very conscious in the story that we tell. Yeah, it is important that when we tell our story, we need to be intentional about it. And that intentionality, and of course, calls for how prepared are we to share this story? Who are we telling this story to? Yemi is talking about the audience. Know who you are telling the story to. That is going to be fundamentally important in how your story lands. Now, I want to share something with us. There was this speaker, he's a comedian. I'm not going to mention the country, but this is how he landed. That the person was making a joke, only that later he realized that nobody was laughing. His joke was pretty good. It's the one that a lot of people will usually laugh at. Of course, he have said it a number of times, only that this time nobody was laughing. What has happened? Later, he realized that he was making a joke in English. And of course, the preamble, all the element of the story were for people that understand English. But the people that he was making a joke to were Italians who do not understand what he was talking about in detail. Therefore, they weren't laughing at what he was saying because, of course, as a comedian, the better part of your story that you are telling or speaking is that you see the reaction of the people when they laugh. Now, that is the response of the people. If as far as comedy is concerned, if this was a lecture, of course, people don't laugh usually in lecture, they say maybe in some instances. So as long as the people are not laughing to your joke, it means that your story that you are telling is not landing. But in this particular case now, we see that the people are not landing because they are not the right audience for the type of story that individual was sharing. So that is why I think what Yemi was saying there is particularly important, that we need to know who are we telling our story to. Because when we know now, we look at the senses and sensibilities of this individual, what make them laugh, what are important to them. You see, there are some stories that you will tell, thinking that the people will laugh, it could really go and trigger emotional response that is going to be negative in them. If you don't know, you will feel that you are doing them a service, but you might actually be doing them a disservice because you are triggering a negative reaction in them. But if you know them very well as your audience, then you will know the type of story to tell and how to frame your story. So I think that is very, very important. Of course, maybe we'll have time to retouch it later on. All right, so I'll pass the mic to Reverend Gloria Tino. Of course, I think this conversation also is very important for Mrs. Gloria for the work that she does. Please tell the people who you are and what is your first take on the conversation.
Thank you, Brother Obehi, and hello to everybody. My sister Yemi in the VIP lounge, as they say, and well, we're all in the VIP lounge. Greetings, Alafia. Alafia is a greeting in the Yoruba language from West Africa, and Yoruba is a very intentional language. Alafia inquires about your well-being, but it also wishes you good health. So you are the person who's asking you Alafia, they're also transferring an energy of wellness to the person you're speaking to. So once again, I say to you, Alafia. My name is Gloria Tinu Ogumbadejo. I'm an ordained minister, a psychotherapist, mental health advocate, a writer, and an ancestral lineage healing practitioner. I offer a bespoke holistic program and experience for my ideal client to go on an ancestral lineage healing exploration and transformative journey to identify their ancestors, their heritage, strengthen their identity, heal intergenerational traumas, identify patterns showing up in their present day lives that are keeping them awake at night, and gain a greater clarity and liberate themselves on a cellular level, making changes in their deepest core, ultimately leading to a more balanced and a harmonious and peaceful life. So, this is a wonderful topic today. Stories can shape the future of the African diaspora and play a vital role in healing and transformation. There's an enduring power of narratives. Stories are the threads that weave the fabric of our identities. And for those in the African diaspora, our narratives are often fragmented, scattered across continents, and buried under the weight of history. But when we come together to share, we begin a collective narrative, one that transcends borders and time, uniting us in a shared experience of resilience, strength, and survival. The impact of these collective narratives is profound. We really should not underestimate our narratives. When we tell them from our hearts, they not only help us to understand who we are, but also provide a sense of belonging. For those in the diaspora whose identities may feel disjointed due to the legacy of slavery, colonization, and migration, these stories become a lifeline, truly a lifeline, a way to connect with a heritage that may feel distant or lost, but by sharing and listening to these stories, we validate our experiences, affirm our identities, and strengthen our communities. I'm reminded about the American Civil Rights Movement. The collective narrative of struggle, resistance, and triumph was built through the stories of people like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and countless unnamed heroes. Their stories, when told together, created a powerful narrative that not only fueled the movement, but also shaped the identity and consciousness of African Americans. This collective story continues to inspire new generations, and there is such a need and necessity in building collective narratives in the world we're living in today. For the African diaspora, it's about reclaiming our history, our identity, and our future. The stories we tell today will shape how future generations understand their place in the world. Without these narratives, our history risks being erased, our contributions overlooked, and our identities diluted. We all know what's going on right now. The world is really troubled, and we are troubled people living in the world. Moreover, collective narratives are essential for healing. The trauma of displacement, racism, and cultural erasure has left deep wounds in the diaspora. We don't have any space to heal. Every day we're being triggered by one situation or another. So we have to hold on to our stories. The trauma of displacement and racism culture, it has left cultural erasure and left deep wounds, like I said, in the diaspora. But by coming together to share our stories, we not only preserve our heritage, but also create spaces for collective healing. In these narratives, we find solidarity, strength, and the courage to confront the past, understand the present, and envisage a better future. And I'll stop here. I'll pass the mic over to Obehi.
Thank you so much, Reverend Gloria. Thank you so much for that. Of course, we know who you represent also for your work and the importance of that. And of course, you know that behind the curtain, how much I celebrate you for who you are and what you bring to the table. Because a time like this, we need people also to help us understand how to frame our reference. Storytelling help us also to do that. You see, in 2015 or 16, thereabout, I wrote a book that I titled Amended the Stream Water. even though I wasn't really talking about storytelling, that book actually began with story. It began in a village called Okbuje, that is an Lesan tradition. Now, the person who was telling the story or the storyteller is also called Okbuje, which is, of course, both of them are linked now. Every evening, children come to listen to the story of Okbuje. Now, that story, that book is significant, not because I'm the writer of the book. I've brought it forward before literary critics, one of the best in the University of Padova, and also anthropologist. And the book is accepted as one of the books of choice for children to read at the University of Verona. That is despite the fact that I have never gone to any university. I don't have a degree, a university degree, okay? So I'm not saying that I am a doctor. That is not what I'm saying. I'm only saying that this story is important because later on, when I go to analyze my own story, the story that I've written, I begin to figure out things that I didn't even know that were in this story. So what am I saying? I am saying essentially that it is important that we have a frame of reference. To the people of Okuji, the children that were living there, their frame of reference was this storyteller who told them a lot of story about them, about their ancestors, about the cultivation, about their life, about the enemies, about the friends in the community. It was really fundamentally important. So I'm still thinking of what I'm going to do with that book. So people have suggested that this book should be turned into a movie. I don't know yet, but I'm saying it is important that we have this strong frame of reference. So thank you so much, very much for that, Reverend Gloria. But before I pass the mic to Dr. Marcia, I want to say something that I continue to reflect on. In the course of my research about the presence of Africans in northern Italy, I remember one of the person that I interviewed. He's a writer, actually. He's one of the very first Africans in Verona. He came as a student, but of course now he's, I can say, an old man because he stayed here for more than 40 years in Italy. And so, of course, I was asking all of them, why did you come here? How come you are still here? And all of that. Those were the questions I was asking. Then I was asking all of them. I remember the man looking at me at a point in the street called Veroneta, Via 20 September. That is where you have the largest concentration of immigrants in the city. It's also very close to the University of Verona. So he was telling me that he literally put it like this. Right now, at this moment, the person I want to stay with is you. And he said it to me that we are on the journey together. Because the title of the project actually is The Journey, meaning people that are in the journey. Of course, the project, we have two books in it, have three phases, and now we are adding the third phase to it, which is going to be a festival of storytelling in the city of Verona. So what I'm saying here now, therefore, is that it is important for us to tell our story, to use our story as a point of reference among ourselves, to have that story as a kind of a reference. We put it in the middle of us. Let's share. We have something in common that connect all of us together. These experiences that we have made is important. We cannot give this job, this responsibility, this privilege, I want to call it, to other people to tell this story for us. It is our story. We need to use it to build who we are. So we're talking about narrative today. Our collective narrative can help us to build ourselves so that we can be rooted on the ground, not on the sand. Our story helps us to be rooted on the ground because it sets the foundation. These are very important. So with that, I pass the mic to Dr. Marcia. What is your take? Please tell the people who you are and your first take in this conversation.
All right, I am Dr. Marcia Thomas, a Christian leadership consultant, life and career coach certified. And every time I'm a part of this discussion as a co-host, I highlight the fact I am involved because I have a series, Adventures in Language Arts, in which I represent disadvantaged rural setting schools The children's story, I have placed it into textbooks that are used across the Caribbean that tells their story, their life, their experiences, and allow them to critically assess through comprehension, through writing, because those activities are in the textbook, because and actually learn to critically think about their own situations and problem solve so they can become masters of their own destiny. And so that is the area in which I am involved in storytelling, and I've also taught literature for years in the Caribbean. So I look also in a very in-depth way. As I look at the topic today, as I honor my other co-hosts, Obi, for inviting me every other Monday, Reverend Gloria, my esteemed colleague, and Yemi, I want to give a big shout out to those in the VIP room, especially those who are my friends, Lisa and Leslie and so on, and with us. But my first take on this topic of narrative is that because it is so important to me, I understand the threads narratives weave by pulling the past, the present, and the future together. This is extremely important for the diaspora because those who come behind us must be faithful. They must get the strength to stand firm into their beliefs. They must understand their foundation and they must understand their own reference point. So it is very, in my opinion, to provide the means of preserving the culture, fostering a unity of core values and reference points that empower those who come behind us to navigate the complexities of living between the different worlds, because the adjustment and adjusting to the different worlds can be a challenge for persons in the diaspora because the expectations of persons are different, the culture and the communion is all different, and for that reason it is a more difficult feat than normal to preserve cultural identity. And so the stories, the narratives that we weave from our own experiences and how we come together with the wide cross section, especially of the African world, is very, very important because we have to keep our culture alive, especially when we are far from home. And so we must be able to pass down wisdom in these narratives, a sense of belonging. We must understand our divine and sacred responsibility to empower and make our own remain resilient through the story as they adjust, as they become flexible, and as they make sense of shared trauma. They must be able to navigate using their authentic identities, meaning where they are coming from, accept loving and honoring and cheering themselves on wherever they are placed to carry out their purpose. Because where we are born are not necessarily God intends us to be rooted. So He sends us all parts of the world because of our skills and our capabilities to do the work that He has appointed us and established us to do. And we have to understand that the narrative is the most effective way to mobilize where we have left from and to connect mobilization to generations and bridge the gaps where and sometimes we take that very seriously. I am of also that when we are giving our narrative from wherever we are, that the stories must be told truthfully and they must be told by those who have experienced it than others. The be at the forefront. We must represent our own experience and we must share our own perspective. And if we allow someone else to do it, must be that we heavily guard saying in our stories and our experiences. And so we must not, and we must be very careful to avoid external interpretations in an effort to, I'm saying we must be careful that we avoid external interpretations, giving people our story and giving persons that buy in on our stories without heavily guarding how we are telling our stories, and making sure that our voices are heard very authentically. Persons don't translate what we are saying out in based on their own interpretation, their stereotypes, and how they want to ascribe certain roles and beliefs to us. We must be very vigilant about that, and we must be able to recognize and celebrate our stories, the good and the bad stories, without presenting it in a monolithic way. Because sometimes we want our stories to be represented, and we have to be guarded, because sometimes how we interpret our experiences in our small space, and how we think the lessons that we think we have learned or we should not have learned, and the blame and the grief and the trauma that we carry it as a heavy burden instead of a light that must light our path, and make us so resilient that we nothing can shake the foundations that we have or we have framed for ourselves. We want to be seen as victims when in fact we are victors, because what we have gone through and what we have experienced, it's not the brave, it's only the brave and the strong that can survive it. And those who are telling our stories for us, or who we are giving the power to frame our narratives, could not have gone through one of those experiences. And so sometimes we undervalue what we have experienced because of the shame that we associate with it, the inadequacy that we think it our less than, or that we think it makes us feel, when in fact it is a story that is so valuable that it has become a diamond, because that experience spans a lot of experiences that other human beings have, because what we are given is something special, because we are special. And so it must facilitate, our narratives must facilitate dialogue, rational dialogue, transformative dialogue, empowering dialogue. It must educate, it must persuade, it must inspire persons to move forward in their context and in their situations. But the issue I have as it relates to our narratives is that sometimes our narratives have become so programmed in our spirits that we exploit this trauma. How do I exploit it? I sense sensation. I sense sensationalize it, because I wanted to use it as a means of exploiting people. And so I make my suffering appear to be so unbearable that I cannot overcome it. And so it's not handled with the care it must handle, and it is not shared with dignity and with the power that it has to change lives. We sometimes try to erase our narratives too, the ones that we don't like or love. And we oversimplify when we give persons our narratives. Sometimes they oversimplify it, and it reduces the importance of it and what it really means and the power that it carries, because it is so misrepresented that it is so different from what we originally started with. And the last point I want to make is that we must be very guarded how we universalize our stories, our narratives, as a diaspora, as a group, because the universalization of our stories greatly diminishes the impact of our stories, because we want it to fit into other person's narrative, even especially if we are using our narratives to make money for ourselves as a source of income. We tend to universalize it to the point where it now becomes a one size that fits all. And it can't be. Our stories and our narratives are very unique, and they are unique for a reason. They are unique because they carry with it a certain power, and we are not to allow money. We are not to allow wanting it to reach the whole world. We are not to allow uh, external interpretations or boundaries on how we are to carry our story limit the power or make us ignore the power dynamics in our story or silence us because it sounds to be such a difficult conversation or make us rush to publish or share stories that people feel are sensational enough or it will have such an impact for their own ends. So we must be guarded about those things. Thank you so much for allowing me to share.
Thank you so much. I can feel your energy. I can feel your energy. That feeling is very important. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And of course, I want to encourage also the people in the audience. If you feel something, the feeling is important, and you want to say something, please welcome. We want to hear also from you because we believe that you are also experiencing something. That thing you are experiencing and how you are approaching it is important for us. I see beautiful faces there. Dauda, Iyabo, Janice, Trudy. Thank you so much for joining us. Gustav, Lisa, Elisa. Okay, yeah, we have Lisa and also Elisa. Okay, we have Faith there. Thank you for being there. Rosha, Akita, and Dr. Marvis. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate each and every one of you. So if you believe there is something you have to say, please join and say it because your point of view is important. You see, some of the things that was actually noted down from your speech, Dr. Marcia, is that, yes, sometimes we have this temptation of trying to water down our story so it can fit in. But I think it is the wrong way to approach story. Because if you look at even history, for example, you see that history are actually two words. His story, which also mean that history is nothing more than a point of view. It means it's written from a point of view. That is why it's called history. Otherwise, it will simply be story, which is to say now that history is written from the point of view of the person who wins in terms of national history, in terms of international history. The person who wins gets to write the history. But now, when we want to talk about story, where we might have lacuna there is that there are the conventional story that is in the hands of the person who is writing the story, who happen to have won. No? But we don't need to see our story from that lens because we are not the writer of their story or what they want to call the global story. If we want to make sure our story is part of the global story, then that story must be read from our point of view because it is our experience. It is what we have passed through. There are very many dynamics to this. I understand there are economic, there are political, there are a lot of things into this. So that when we try to fit in, we also should be careful that we are not watering down our story so that it fits into the narrative of somebody who have created a certain narrative because they want an objective for themselves. We must also have an objective that our story is also important. We also have a point of view. We have also passed through an experience. I think that is critically important for us as people of African descent and as people of African in the diaspora. All right, having said that, I have a question I want to ask Yemi. The question have to do with the platform. I like what you were saying before, that today you went out to have a walk with some people and you were gathering information about them. And in fact, you already did make mention of the fact of the platform. So I'm looking for what are some of the ways that we can have a collaborative platform to share story? Because for us to be able to talk about collective narrative, we need to share. We need to have a place where we can share. What is your take on that?
Okay. One thing I just wanted to say is today when I went out walking, it was basically an informal walk, just people sharing their stories organically. I wasn't making any record, but I could see how it could grow into something that could be documented. But going back to how we can share our stories, I think one of the important things from what everyone has said as speakers is even part of the collective story, we have to acknowledge that there's the individual story. And that ties into what Obia was saying about who is telling the story. When it's the individual story and then it becomes part of a collective, it can be very unique to you and you alone because it's more original. However, in terms of, before I go on to how we can tell stories, one thing that comes to mind also is when we tell our stories, we always have to focus on, it has to be solution focused as well. And I say that because even as much as we know our stories are as a lot of pain, trauma, grief, yes, in the past, and we acknowledge that, and we need to know what our griefs are even individually because it impacts your future. However, we also need to, as Dr. Marcia was saying, we need to acknowledge where we are or where you are today with your individual story, and now it can be part of a collective story. And what are you celebrating today? And also, when we look at solution focused coaching or ideas, you have to think of what, with your story in the past and the present, and how you want to share your story, what are the filters impacting the perception and originality of your story before it even becomes part of a collective story? Okay. In terms of systems, so now I'm going to talk about individual story. When we look at even collective or individual stories, yes, we look at the past, we look at our forefathers, we look at how our history of our forefathers, fathers, mothers, and how we now live, part of that story, how it's impacted on us. But also, we also have to share stories of your present generation. How does it relate to what has impacted your past or certain things some people will say that people are carrying so much baggage, or how does it impact how you see yourself? Because how you see yourself will also impact how you're going to sell your story and who you're going to allow to tell your story and how you own your story. Okay. So now in terms of storytelling, I would say I find podcasts are invaluable, recording, because we now live in very busy lives. And that's why I set up my podcast called Widow Recovery Secrets, for example. And it came to its solution focus because I started that podcast because of a personal experience of becoming a widow. But your story could be trauma, being the third generation child of the African diaspora. And I started, and you find when I did it, I interviewed people from different continents of what it means to be a widow. While I'm based in the West. Yes, I'm of African origin. So the loss of losing your spouse, there's a cultural context, and the cultural context links to my forefathers or before them, and how it affected me being a third generation African Nigerian. So so that is a way of sharing your story. And also, it also can create a collective story because in me bringing other widows from West Africa to share their experience of a widow, to someone who is in America to share their story, they become collective. But the only commonality is loss of a spouse. But everyone has a different experience because of their geographical location. And that also ties in when we are from the African diaspora. That's why, as Dr. Marcia rightly said, it can never be a universal global story. Wherever we are, our stories will be different because of where we are located. And just to share, before I'm aware of the time, just to share also is moving from, yes, there's trauma, there's grief, there's pain in our stories. But also, I glimpsed an article from the Pan-African Editor's Choice page of African women sharing their stories. And one capture that came to mind was, this was from refugee to role model. That was the title of one of the women's articles. And it said, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. My scars are not a sign of weakness, but a testament to my strength and resilience. So there is trauma, there's pain, but we have to look at solutions and also share your own immediate story and add it to the collective story. But I use a podcast. And I've written a book. I wrote a book on my journey as a widow. But I find recording is much easier in our modern hectic day.
Thank you so much for that, Yemi. Thank you. I appreciate that. That is really, really highly valuable. I appreciate that. All right. Now, to Reverend Gloria, I want you to speak on healing, because for somebody now to move from being a victim to being a victor, or actually to reshape the narrative in a way that the story can be a story of empowerment, there need to be a kind of healing that will take place there. For example, if you look at the story of Nigerians in Italy, for example, because I live in Italy, of course, many of you know what have happened to many Nigerian women, to be specific, but also the men sometimes can also be abused. But a lot of women have been abused here in Italy. And there have been a lot of initiative both by government and also organization working to help some of these women rehabilitated. So now we are telling these people that they need to own their story, to champion their narrative. Speak to us about this healing part of it. How can they heal themselves so that they can then own their story and then tell that story from not from the point of view of being a victim, but as an empowerment for other people? Please share with us.
Thank you, Brother Obehi. I'm still reeling from the contributions from my sister Yemi and Dr. Marcia. There were so many gems there. I feel I was noting them down that I want to respond to this, respond to that, but I'll keep that for the moment. You know, one of the things that I'm reminded of, particularly the times we are now, is that we see the world not necessarily how it is, but from how you are feeling. So ancestral lineage healing is a crucial component in the process of healing. The pain of the past, whether it's the trauma of slavery, colonization, or migration, often lingers in our collective consciousness, manifesting as feelings of disconnection, loss, or even shame. To heal these wounds, we must look to our ancestors and the stories they left behind to sort of see how, I mean, from my observation, there's a lot of unprocessed trauma and grief in the world at the moment. Those who cause pain, who hurt, are also acting out unprocessed trauma. So there's so much of that at the moment that however we can find holistic healing, it, I think at this point is something that we should all be looking for, looking to. And ancestral lineage healing involves acknowledging the pain and trauma of our forefathers, honoring their struggles, and integrating their stories into our collective narrative. The process not only helps us to heal individually, but also strengthens our communities. When we heal our ancestral lineage, we release the burden of generational trauma, allowing us to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose and identity. And again, at this point, I think of a lot of our traditions that we have turned our backs on. Um, Something even as simple as the practice of libation. In many African cultures, where water or alcohol is poured onto the ground as an offering to the ancestors, this ceremony is a way of acknowledging and honoring those who came before us, asking for their guidance and healing the wounds of the past. The African diaspora, in African diaspora, such practices can be a powerful way to reconnect with our roots and begin the process of ancestral healing. And this doesn't mean some elaborate thing. Some of it is symbolic, but in doing that, you are reconnecting with the traditions, and continuing these practices, even in a modest, symbolic way, is significant and passes the torch on to our future generations so they don't forget. I've watched many African American movies or music videos where this process of libation is poured for that purpose. They do it in a joking way, but if we do it with intentionality, we understand what it is we're doing, it's a very powerful healing tool. Just because sometimes when people think of our traditions, we think, oh, it has to be something, complicated and something elaborate. We can modify it to how we're living today. The important thing is holding on to those traditions and the cultures. Yoruba spirituality, in particular, with its rich traditions and deep connection to the ancestors, offers a profound framework for healing and building collective narratives. Central to the Yoruba belief is the concept of Ori. I talk about it a lot, ORI, which represents one's spiritual head or destiny. Ori is not just about an individual fate, but is also deeply connected to one's ancestors and community. Your Ori, you cannot do anything without the consent of your Ori, your which incorporates intuition, what you came into the world with, who you are. These practices are vital to a community of our traditions, and it is at our peril if we cast them aside or engage in any belief that denigrates these traditions. Moreover, the Yoruba tradition emphasizes the importance of community, something we in the diaspora are in desperate need of. Ceremonies, festivals, or communal events that bring people together, reinforcing the bounds of shared identity and collective narrative. This is what we're doing, what we're engaging in fortnightly in these audio rooms. There are so many different ways to keep these traditions alive in the diaspora. So we need to do our research, talk to our elders, talk to family members, pick out things that you can modify, that you can incorporate in your daily life, that will enable you to feel that connection. You have to be intentional with this thing. It's not just going to happen out of the blue. We are doing our part. Other spaces that you may be engaged in, begin the conversation. You will be amazed how much people connect to it, how people resonate with it, because there's so much healing that needs to take place. And I pass the mic over to you, Brother Bay.
Thank you so much, Reverend Gloria. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that, and I really do. You see, it is important that when we are talking of, because for somebody that is hearing you talk about ancestral healing for the first time, that individual might sort of be frightened, because of course that is how we have been educated to be scared of who we are, to be scared of our tradition, our belief system, and all of that. But what a shame. We should never be ashamed of who we are, because connected to the ancestors is saying connected to your father, connected to your mother. Any tradition, any belief system, any education that teaches you to hate that channel is the institution of an oppressor. They are trying to detach you from who you are. Because people think ancestors are some demons that are coming from the tree or somewhere, but they have no understanding that by ancestors we are talking of the people who you literally were one day inside their system. Like you were literally inside their consciousness. Without them, you cannot be here. Maybe I need to make a little explanation of that. You see, one day, a man and a woman came together. They gave birth to a child. You are that child. Okay, only that one day before then, there was a man and a woman. They came together, they gave birth to a child. That child is your father. Only that before then, you basically can trace it like that for as long as you want. Those are the people we are talking about. They are your people. So when we say try to retrace our step back to how they used to live, so that we can find a solution to our problem, learning from them. This is not something that is mysterious. If we are afraid of this, it's because we have been miseducated. There is a serious work that we are doing on this with a lot of scholars on how to help people to retrace their step back. It has nothing to do with how much education that you have gotten. It has nothing to do with whether you are not even educated at all. It has to do with, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Reverend Gloria was talking about Ori. You see, among the Igbo people, that is called Chi. Among the Esan people, that is called Ehi. The other day, I took time. Usually, my articles are usually very short, about 1,200 more or less. Okay, long for some people. So, talking about a he in my language, because I wanted to explain what I understand by it, it took me 5,000 words to explain it. Because, there are a lot of dynamics in the explanation that we need to do. Spirituality for us is not a kind of luxury, it's the way of life of the people. We are literally connected to the spirit. That is our understanding of life. I'm not saying this is a global understanding. This is how we see life. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that. You see, Dr. Marcia was saying before that you don't need to over water down your story because you want to be accepted. Tell the people this is how we see it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the way that they understand it. But you know what? It was not supposed to make sense to them because it is not about them. Your life is not to be lived to the pleasure of another person. You are here full packaged. You are full, complete. You don't need another person to give you authentication before you can become a person. You are already a person, full and complete. All right, I know this can be a little bit deep for some people, but it's okay. Now, to Dr. Matia, I have a question for you. And the question is this. We now know about the advantages, the benefit, and all the things that we can say about building collective narrative and using it as a way to reinforce who we are, our identity in the world. But are there some challenges? Do we have some challenges here? What do you say about that?
I think we have a lot of challenges, but one of the greatest challenges us. And that's part of the problem why our narratives do not connect generations or bridge generational gaps, because there are parts of our stories that we have not accepted and that we keep hidden because we carry this burden of shame or unacceptance and this inadequacy, deep inadequacy to fit in wherever we are. And it comes from this great desire for self-actualization and to excel, meaning to have the good life. And so the gap between the older and the younger generation and the need to make our generations that come behind us better off than us and not go through the struggles in our minds, and I put struggles in quotation marks, that we have experienced that have built us and made us resilient. We don't want them to go through it, so we do not share these experiences authentically with the younger generation because we don't want them to reinterpret the stories or to misinterpret the stories. And that's where we go wrong many times, because they must be able to hear the stories to have clarity of who they are and why they are and what they must remain as they reinterpret and adopt these stories to their current realities. It must be a springboard of resilience, of courage, of meaning, of strength, and of connection. And so, if we do not tell them honestly, if we simplify our stories, if we sensationalize our stories, if we do not accept our stories, if we do not believe and move with conviction, then we have an issue. And so the intergenerational dialogue many times become very scant or becomes lacking. And so the values and the history and the identity are lost over time. And so we must make sure that our stories are told unapologetically and courageously and authentically, truthfully, and bravely, so that it can evolve over time and strive and make the spirits of our ancestors and also of overcoming live on. The next thing that we find is that our narratives are not doing enough because of our desire to fit in, to challenge misconceptions. And so diaspora communities are mostly subjected to stereotypes and negative portrayals because we are too silent. I don't know if it is afraid we are afraid, or that we are timid, or that the story has been watered down over time in such a way because of the example I gave before, that in the crafting and sharing of the narrative, it is so adjusted and modified that we can no longer challenge the misconceptions. And so it's not assertive
You can
enough,
use shower.
it's not accurate enough, and there is a nuanced identity. The next thing that I would want to look at as I relate to these obstacles that we are having is that our narrative sometimes confront political and social issues or mobilizations or movements within a diaspora community. I heard a lady the other day talked about, I can't remember her name now, but she was doing a presentation and she was narrating an African. I can't remember her name because I follow her a lot, but they sometimes age give you that difficulty. But she was speaking about the nations of Europe talking about coming into the communities to assist and to mobilize and to empower persons. And she's saying these same persons have the heads of our ancestors in their museums, and we have to pay to see them, and they are telling the stories of these persons in an in a way that that does not represent the experience, because they don't know the experience. So the exploiter now wants to become the savior by ignoring those issues. And it is persons like her, because of her age, that knows the narrative that allows the truth to be out there and the clarity to be given to the young generation who feel and see these people as saviors. And so the implications, there is another hindrance there, because we sometimes suppress the truth about the narratives and do not expound them enough, because we do not want to ignite attention, negative attention. We don't want to be left out of the spoils and the scarce benefits. We don't want to, we feel that we can uh engage these persons and manipulate them to help us, but that's not the case. Our narratives must be that we find a way to help ourselves, to mobilize our members where they are, to form the groups and the unions, and surround and engage around a common cause, which can be related to immigrant rights and social justice for persons in the diaspora, because there are persons there that can tell the story, but of course, as I said, they have to maintain what they're doing. And so, and their spoils scarce benefits, and keep their spoils within them, with the misconception that we want to create a legacy and we want to preserve a platform that our children don't have it as difficult as us. I hope I'm not touching any corns and so on, because that is really the plain truth. But our narratives must proudly highlight our contributions, must promote our resilience, must emphasize our richness, and it must also promote a positive representation of who we are and what we are capable of doing in the broader society that we call the diaspora. We must make sure that we assist others through our stories and narratives of overcoming and authority and power to become masters of their own destiny. I value that a lot. And to be true to themselves so they cannot be false to any man. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to host this program every other Monday and to share from the point of view that we are all created equal. We are all thrust into the same world. The inequalities, Obi, are not as serious as we make them unless we remain divided.
Thank you so much for that, sister. That is a powerful word that you said there. There are a lot of powerful nuggets in your presentation, and you know what? I am so happy that we have it on record, so that we can review it from time to time. In fact, that is the intentionality also about it. You see, it is impossible for us to tell our story without somehow, sometime offending someone. The reason is this. You see, if you go to the savannah, say maybe for example, you want to tell a story, say assuming you are an overseer of the savannah and you want a story to be told, you tell the antelope, tell me the word story. The antelope is going to tell you a story, right? But do you think if you give that say possibility to the lion to tell the story, it's going to tell it the same way? It's not going to tell it the same way because the antelope, the priority of the antelope is not the same priority of the lion. Because the story the antelope is going to tell is to make sure that it stays alive from the hands of the lion. That, if you see it, is a good story, no? Only that it's not a good story to the lion. Because if that story was accepted as a true story, the lion is going to die of starvation. Therefore, from what perspective are we understanding this story? You see, there is this conversation that is very common in the United States. In that when you want to talk about history, you see, you don't need to talk about the evil, the terrorism that have been committed in the United States by members of the so-called white supremacy, no? Because you don't want to offend them. You don't want to make them feel bad. Okay, not really dead because they are dead. They're no longer alive, but you don't want to make their children feel bad. So because we are talking about peace and love, how to live together and all of that. So you don't want to make somebody feel bad. So let's forget what have happened to you. That is a good story for them. You see, in the United States, when you bring out the issue of critical race theory, you are seen as somebody who is particularly a bad person because you are triggering something that is negative in the mind of the people. You see, those same people don't have any problem when they want to talk about the Holocaust, where the victim, in this case, are the Jews. They don't want to talk about what have happened to the Congo. You see, more than 50 million people massacred. Why? Because it depends on which perspective are we telling the story. If the Congolese are to tell this story, do you think it's going to be a good story to the Belgian? It's not going to be a good story. But are we going to remain like this, not able to tell our story because we don't want to offend somebody? I think that is where the authenticity comes in, and also the boldness to stand up and say, this is my perspective. I am a human being. I feel they have their boot on your neck, and they don't know that it is hurting you. They pretend they don't know. So they want you, don't talk, don't shout, don't shout. You don't want to disturb the quiet of the community. But the question is, what do we do now? Are we going to be afraid and not able to say that, oh, it's hurting me? Because if you don't say that it is hurting you, you will die literally. So we need to gather the courage. In the diaspora, we are hundreds of millions of people. But you know what is happening? We are divided. Somebody is benefiting from that. And some of us are too ignorant of the fact that none of us can do it alone. We need all of us to survive. You see, there is one politics that is going on in Africa that we need to discourage. It's called the politics of the strong man. Where so mafias in Europe, we make one person very powerful. And that individual can become the president, the leader. Everybody is rallying around him. He might be a dictator, but of course it's okay. We can permit him to live. After all, we are taking care of him. But they can take care of him. We see the case of Gabon, where we see this individual is the smartest of all. He can control the military, control everything. Because for France, it's cheaper for them to maintain an individual. That individual can be very strong. The people, therefore, can be made weak. There is something that the Chinese did that I think maybe we need to pay attention to. That Bisa Moyo make reference to this in her book, How the West Was Lost. That when the Chinese are coming out to the economy to play the game, they change the rule. In the West, they play capital-intensive capitalism because they have a lot of money, but they don't have a lot of people. Therefore, they don't have a lot of labor, which is also why they still need a lot of people coming into the Western country. Even though they pretend that they don't, they do. The Chinese do not have a lot of money coming into this game, but they have a lot of people. What did they do? They play a labor-intensive capitalism. There is still capitalism. Yes, it's a communist system, but there is also a bit of capitalism in the system. They play to their strength. What is their strength? The people. In Africa, we have the people. If we want to win, we must play to the people. Not just buy the private jet for some few individuals. Let's make a lot of people have small. When all of them are put together, they will be able to put the strength. I say again, in the diaspora, we have hundreds of millions of people. We don't need strong men. The days of the strong men are over. Let's empower ourselves. That is what I think we need in reshaping our narrative. But Dr. Ava, thank you so much for joining us. What is your take on the conversation? Please share with us.
Hi, good morning. I'm sorry that I had to leave. I had a meeting that I forgot, but I'm going to be very disruptive to this conversation. And I am unapologetic about being disruptive. I hear this narrative all the time. And I think of, I'm going to take Nigeria, for example, who has millions. The last time I checked, my MP and I sat in a meeting last week, and we're looking at the new president of Burkina Faso. And he said, Doc, how much is the population of Nigeria? 200 and something million. Let's take Nigeria as an example. Nigeria has 23 or 34 million people. So quite a lot, right? And Nigeria has one of the best energy sources of the world, yet Nigerians hardly have electricity. I'll let that sink in for a second. The few people that are there making on money, I used to work for, oh my God, there's a Nigerian company in oil and gas I used to work for. I used to write for them. I can't remember their name now. Super Crude, I think they're called, or something like that. Don't remember. Some crude. And Nigeria has that many people. The few people that are taking the oil are a small fraction, yet they're able to take the oil, divide and conquer. I wonder why. Let that pause for a second. Let's take it at a very smaller level. Why can't we, as a diaspora, unite and raise our narrative and do all the things that the Chinese, the Indians do very well? I lived in Europe for years. I'm still a European citizen. Why? You know why? Because whilst they have their own challenges internally, they have integrity for each other. They respect each other. They don't try to steal each other as much. And even if they plan to, they allow each other to grow and they work together. We don't have that mentality. We are not prepared to have that mentality. It's me, and let me ride on you until I think, until I think I can get there. I believe, and this is my philosophy of us Black people, or some of us Black people. There's an analogy that my mom used to tell me when I was a child, and she said, do you know why the wasp did not learn to make honey? And there's an old adage that says that because when the wasp saw what the bee was doing, she thought she had learned everything, and then she ran away. And so she never realized that the bee was watching her and realized that she was taking away her ideas because the bee thought they were working in unity. That's my mom's own analogy of it. So the wasp ran away thinking that he had gotten everything, but the bee was smart and the bee kept one little thing behind. Black people do not understand how to work together with decency and integrity, and understand that we can all work together towards a common goal and all of us can do well. No, we have the crab in the barrel mentality. How many years have we been saying the same narrative? It has not changed much. So when I hear these conversations, I get really frustrated, and I understand and respect people's perspective. But let us go to a LinkedIn level, for example. You don't need to go further than LinkedIn to see that. We drag each other down. We take away people's ideas. We try to work together. Then we pretend we're working. Then we grab people's ideas and we run. And it's there in front of our eyes. It's almost like it's something in our DNA. And I had to be questioning the other day. Is it a survival mechanism that some cultures have as opposed to others? But we need to eradicate it. And it's not going to happen in my generation. I know that for sure, because it's been happening from my grandmother time. And grandma used to tell me these stories, and we're here today. Until we understand As Bob Marley said, how to unify. And I'm going to add on that to respect and appreciate the way the other nations do it. We're going to be here until you and I rot in our graves. And I will say that very, very loudly and unapologetically, because we have not learned anything. We backbite, we drag each other down, we tear each other from a barrel, we think we alone must be on the top. We cannot work in unison, we cannot work in integrity. We make people afraid to join partnerships with us. I'm afraid to do partnerships with people as a Black person. And I'm going to say this, and some of you are going to be offended. I now prefer to go and join with the white person because I've given many Black people a try. Most 99% of my partnerships over the 10 years I've been in business were with Black people. I still have some, thankfully. But for the most part, those I trusted the most, those I trusted the most, those I put on my back and say, come, let me help you elevate. Come, let me help you get where I'm getting to. Let me walk with you, side by side with you, were some of the worst people, my own. So this narrative is never going to change until we. So stop talking about the European. Let's not talk about the Chinese. Let's talk about ourselves. What is our part in it? I wasn't going to join this conversation. I was going to sit back and listen. But let me say something to you. Until we are the change that we want to see in the world, we are going to be here. As a publisher who tells stories, I'm going to tell you very straight. One of the things I had to do with my book publishing on LinkedIn, I'm going to talk it here. I had to decide that I'm going to change my game and move from just publishing, because some of those who I was publishing with were not understanding what I was trying to do with them. Black people. So everybody became a publisher. I was in a room the other day and somebody who was in my diary learning how to publish from me, helping them with their own book, only 6 weeks ago, is now becoming a publisher. How? Black people. How does that happen? And it doesn't mean that they cannot be, don't get me wrong. I had to write somebody this weekend and I said to him, why do I want to go on your email list? You just came in my diary the other day learning how to even put your book together. How are you going to tell me to come and become on your publishing list? How did that happen? When? Because we come in like ants. We watch what everybody do and we need to take a little piece of it. And there's nothing wrong, but do it with integrity and respect. And I'm passionate about these things because until we understand ourselves and value each other, we're going to be here forever. And that's my take.
All right. Thank you
I
so much
rest
for
my
that.
mic.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Eva, for that. I'm not going to let you go until you respond to this. What is your recommendation? Like a few
Before she
points?
responds, Obi,
Yeah,
before she
okay.
responds,
Okay,
we
okay.
want to balance it a little because while we know of ourselves and what Dr. Eva is saying is very valid, and I will support Dr. Eva in the validity of the fact that we struggle as Black people to adjust to having each other strive. And one of that reason is because who we allow to program us by design and by default were Christians. If we go back to the history, were Christian people who came to say that they would be our savior, they would guide us in a certain way, and there were nobody brave enough to fight that war that became the war for our minds. And so there was programmed generationally by the opening that door to allow persons who pretended to be persons who would be saviors under the guise of Christianity, and I'm a solid Christian from I was born. I don't know anything else. To guide us out of what they presumed was our darkness into light. And that programming became more powerful as generations thrive because we live what we learn. And so parents who became convinced under that guise say this is the better way and fought a battle that said, I want my children to become competitors and not collaborators because I want them to be better than me. So it was really by default that they sought to protect the generations in this way. Those who were fortunate enough to escape became what you became a while ago, an agitator and a troubler of the peace. Their children bloomed and became collaborators in whatever era they are and created a generation of collaborators. The problem is, it becomes very difficult to find the collaborators because collaborators are not visible. Because the moment you become a collaborator, you are seen as a trouble of the peace. And so they form cliques together wherever they are, and they do the very same thing that the Chinese and other white people seem to be doing. And I say seem because I have Chinese counterparts who have the same issue, who are doing business with black people in Manchester, in Clarendon, and also in Kingston because their own defrauded them. I have what, if you look at Microsoft, if you have look at the very LinkedIn, if you actually look at Apple and the origin, it was because persons who they trusted defrauded them. I could go into the detail with facts, but the issue has to be that when I, as an individual, collaborate with Obehi, when I collaborate with you, Dr. Ava, when I collaborate with Reverend Gloria, when I collaborate with Wilson, when I collaborate with Lisa, Faith, or anybody down here, you must trust yourself enough. You must deprogram yourself. You must see the value that you're adding, and you must start in your little space to intelligently choose those persons who show themselves to be collaborators. How do we know that they are collaborators? They don't seek glory. They don't seek to be always visible and in the eyes of everybody. They don't seek to take the glory that belongs to someone else. They acknowledge and value and appreciate those who have brought them to where they are. The issue is when we become strong enough to stand on our own, we kick over the bucket and we remove the ladder of those who bring us to where we are, because no matter how great we are, we do not do it by ourselves. And many of us did not get any help to be successful from any white person. We got it from our own. We became the dissemblers. We became ungrateful many times. And we decide that now that I have the fortune, that puts me on par with those who I have always wanted to be among, the white or the European or the Chinese or wherever we are. When we get the wealth that make us get opportunities and these persons begin or appear to value us, we do not want to be associated with those who can bring us back to where we are. I heard somebody say today, a white man a black man in his audio room, that he resents poverty so much that he does not associate with anyone who represents poverty. He's a black person, and I am of the belief that no black person must entertain his business. If you are going to say that you resent poverty so much that you don't want to be associated with us, then you should not, your business must not strive off our backs. You must go to who you can appreciate. And if we are to get very emotional about those things, I think it works in two ways. We must know ourselves enough that we carry our nation with us. When Chinese and Europeans are ungrateful, they are protected by their own. When they are betrayers, they are protected by their own. When it happens to us, we do not protect. We throw people underneath the bus. We, as just like in a family, when something happens, we try to protect our family members and we try to make sure that we preserve it in the family, is what we must start doing as black people. Preserve our negatives and overcome them. Fight together to make people overcome them. So if someone has an issue, we do not support it, but we do not throw them under the bus. That's just my opinion. There are persons who you cannot work with, whether they are black, white, Chinese or not. You can't work with them because they have been so programmed that they have become robots. Those who are not robots, we must bring them out of this darkness into light. If we find that they do not want our help, put them to other people that they can trust and who they can listen to. Because many times a person might not listen to me because of my stance, maybe because of how I deliver myself, or maybe because of how I trigger them based on a trigger that they have been programmed with. It doesn't mean that anything is wrong with me. It just means that they can't accept what I am giving because of what it represents to them. We have to balance it, Obi. We have to balance it. And if we don't balance it, we will not begin the change that is so needed, because Dr. Ava is quite right. Our first instinct is to protect ourselves in such a way that we destroy other people. But that is how we have been programmed. We have had to be fighting for years, more than 300 years, for our survival, because we have been conned so much by persons who represent themselves as our saviors. That is not an easy thing to overcome. It will not be overcome overnight. But if we are determined and if we are focused and intentional, those of us who have done it, we have formed a conglomerate where we assist each other. There are groups right now that the first choice to give their products and services is to their own. They deviate only when it is not profitable, because persons are not collaborating, they are competing.
Dr. Matia, I really appreciate that point. Those are important conversations to sort of help to balance up the story. You see, it is complicated the way we really are as a people, but that complication is coming from how we get here based on our education, because we are essentially behaving according to the information that we are given. So, but it depends on what we want to see from there, how we want to see it. But this is what I think is wrong. That because of the way we appear, there is something genetically wrong with us, which is, of course, that is an opinion of some people. If you were to use that to justify what is happening, which is a lack of collaboration that is happening among Africa, that is evidently lack of collaboration among Africa, you might say, oh, Africans are genetically impossible to collaborate among themselves, so let's help them. But you see, the point is that we need to understand that that too is baked into the system. For the fact that he see that it is impossible for us to collaborate is part of the education. But the way that we also get out of here is another education, which is we need to unlearn what is not helping us so that we can move to the direction that we want. I am not saying that there are no Africans that are going to stab you in the back. But that is not the representation of African people, as it were, in general sense. Of course, I understand. We know the death of Michael. Yes, we know the death of Thomas Sankara. These African people are the ones that killed them. Do you know what the narrative is? Don't you see they are killing their people? Don't you see they can't work together? Don't you see they are stupid? Don't you see that is the narrative? Only that I want us to look beyond that to see what is the work, the mechanism that make us to comport this way. If we understand it from there, the way that person is coming, trying to cheat on you, you need to look beyond that, and maybe that person really need help. I think we can find a solution. I think we can really work together.
Bobby, I'm gonna be out of range. I want to interject quickly because I'm heading to politics. I just want to say that I don't want you guys to misunderstand what I was trying to say. At no point am I not saying that we cannot and shouldn't work together and there's not programming. But I'll give you a quick example. I like to use very simple things. I'm not very smart, so I like to keep things very simple. I was born to a teenage mother. She was 14 years old. 14. I only learned that this year, actually. Thought she was 16 when she had me. I have a lot of siblings, both sides. Parents didn't end up together. But I decided to choose a different programming for my siblings. I made a conscious choice. It wasn't by accident. I could have been just like my siblings. And I'm not saying my siblings are any particular way, but it's not how I would have wanted to become. I have two children. My two children are innately children who are philanthropists. Why? Because they have seen me do and they have decided. My son will go to school, for example, very simplistic example, but we're talking about programming. We can choose the programming we want to. So when I hear that we've been enslaved for 300 years and we carry the legacy, I'm not dispelling that is true. But when are we going to stop and choose a different programming? That's what I'm trying to ask. Because the facts are, we cannot continue to use it as an anchor and a hook, an anchor to crutch on to when we don't do it right. When we're not dispelling and displacing and casting out that slavery happened and programming happened. But when are we going to get past that? Because I could have said, I grew up in a teenage home. My mother had me at 14. My mother doesn't read and write. And this is why I'm a prostitute, for example. I could have done that. But I chose differently. So after 300 years, many generations later, are we still going to sit there and continue to use it as a crutch? Or are we going to say, you know what, because we've stood here for 300 years and it's not quite gotten us to where we ought to have been? Many other nations have had wars and all kind of programming and everything else. And I'm not saying that the Chinese don't have their issues, and I'm not saying that other people don't. Of course, every nation has. But when you look around you vastly, we seem to be the nation that have the issues that are at surface. And if everybody else have it, they mask it very well, and they're progressing and they're working together, but not us. So I'm not saying that we're not being programmed. I'm not saying that we didn't have slavery. But I'm saying, when are we going to start choosing a different programming? Because right now, and I might sound sore because I am sore. I am sore from some of the black people I've chosen to collaborate with. I am sore. And I'm cautious. Can you imagine? I am cautious of my own.
But Dr. Ava, there
I
are
have
huge
I have
progress.
three people I've been. So my signal may be bad. So let me just yield my mic
All
There
right.
are
No,
huge progress
because I
that
don't
has
think you
been
can hear
made,
me. But
Obi.
thank you for the opportunity.
I can hear
There are
you.
very huge progress that has been made, for example, in our diaspora. That make us that are evidence of the steps we are taking to collaborate and to change the narrative, since we are on narratives. And if we look in the film and media industry, for example, we see a lot of movies that are taking strands now, and persons are collaborating. They are not killing each other. They are pulling persons from their groups, from their culture, from their to act in these and represent the collective building of our stories and narratives, Obihi. And the millions of films that are out there now from the diaspora is extremely important, especially on Netflix and YouTube. Everybody's creating a TV program, and we are using our own, and the issues are not that we are not working together well. What the issue is that we are building such a vast network that we are creating jobs, and we are creating strongholds for persons to not just seep into the culture, not just to share their narrative, but to pass on this collaborative spirit to others. If we look at our music too, we find that a lot of them are inspiring young persons to collaborate. And so we are using what belongs to us to bring that method into fruition. Of course, these things take time because the programming took time. If we look in the fashion and design industry, we are using our own. We have Romy, we have so many other persons, and they are collaborating with their own, and they are promoting their own, and they are highlighting their own, and they are making money as a group of persons, and their livelihood, their mindset, their approach is changing because they are now finding that they can trust each other. Of course, there's a surge of entrepreneurship also, and if we look at those things and how we are now investing, persons are looking at building Africa. We have Africa 2020, which came out of the vision of someone who decided that he would no longer continue with the programming, which is David. We have several doctors, eagles, and those who are out there doing that work of deep programming and re-socializing persons. We have movements in the diaspora that builds the diaspora, that does re-educating, that advocate for those issues to be entertain, and also intellectually pulling people out of that programming. The issue is that these persons who are standing, even as it relates to health and wellness, I don't remember the audio room that I was on. I think it was yours, Obi. If not yours, it was
another one with Angelica, where persons, no, it was with Dr. Ross, and he has formed a group of persons who are very concerned about the health and wellness of Black people. They look at the diseases that we are predisposed to and why we are predisposed to these, and they have created clusters and also programs and organizations that serve us and our needs. And so the work is being done, a lot of work is being done, and technology and innovation has helped us with that. And we have persons also who are making it the point of duty to teach generational collaboration through building your generation. How can you use your gifts and your talents to build your generation while you build your family? So a lot of work is being done out there. We must become a part of that crusade in our little corner. So we are not, the pace might not be at the pace where we want. And what Dr. Ava is saying is very, very legitimate. We cannot continue to hide behind the programming. What we need to do is to see where we can fit in the decluttering and the deprogramming. That's where we must do. And if we find that we can't fit anywhere, we must start a little in our little corner with those who we know. And we must purge those who have been so programmed that they need a vaccine. We must give them that vaccine to change them. And we do it with our consistent behavior and our consistent rejection of when they inject these types of negative energy into our progress. We must fight it. And I want to thank you for the fight, Dr. Ava. You are putting up a good fight, and it will make an impact if we are consistent. Thank you, Obi. I have to, because I'm passionate as Dr. Ava about this.
Thank you to both of
Dr.
you.
Marcia, we're not gonna, one second, Obi, we're not gonna go back and forth on it. But I want to say it again. One line. I'm not saying we've not made progress. Sorry. I'm just saying I'm at the shipping company picking up something. I'm not saying we haven't made progress. I'm saying that we should have been further along. And when you experience these situations, it really, if think about how many people out there, and you talk about the movie industry. It was just yesterday I was in a movie meeting. And when we Googled Caribbean movies, for example, Dr. Marcia, there are not many of Caribbean movies on Netflix. So we're not going to go into that part. Maybe Africans and Europeans and Americans, yes, but Caribbean don't have many. I think we found two. One by Stormzy and one by Storm in Negril, and one by somebody else in Trinidad. But moving along from that, we are not where we should have been. Ask ourselves why. There are many nations who have suffered like we have, and probably not as much because slavery was harsh. We know that. But the reality is that we should have been further, the needle should have been further along. And if many of us were more decent to collaborate, to pull each other forward, we would be further along. That's all I'm saying. So all you said is valid, and I appreciate, but I'm just saying that we could have been further along. I've sat in many meetings with many. I had a movie meeting the other day with many movie directors and producers, and the echo was the same. I've sat in many meetings. I was in a meeting in Zurich last week, and the echo was the same. So if we didn't have 50% less, if we had 50% less echoing amongst ourselves about the same issue, we would have been 50% more ahead. That's all I'm saying. So let that sit for a second. Enjoy the conversation, but we could have been further ahead.
All right.
That's what I'm saying.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ava. Thank you. I appreciate your conversation and your sharing. All right, Mr. Wisi, thank you so much for joining us. So what is your take on the conversation?
Well, good morning, everybody. And I have to apologize because I'm not fully invested in this. I came into the conversation late and I just heard, I think it was Dr. Ava's really passionate contribution, and I was just absolutely hooked. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm actually a progressive leadership, personal development, and high performance coach. I am half Nigerian, half West Indian, and I grew up in the care system in England. So when I was in the care system, I was programmed. I'm loving the term programmed. I was programmed by white society, and I'm not saying that to be a victim or anything like that. That's just the way it was. And most of my life, I grew up in in the white environment, hence the way I speak, the way I move, the jobs that I've done. You know, when I was 16, I went into the British military. I had a 12-year career. I went through the rank system. I became a commander. I went into special forces. I then came out. I started working for the Lloyds Bank Group and other, let's say, major British corporates. Then I kind of woke up, I guess, and I decided that I wanted to do something for myself. So I left England in 2001, and I went to live in the most unlikeliest of places, um, which was in southern Germany, in a town called Berchtesgaden. And Berchtesgaden, in the history books, is famous for the wrong reasons, because it was Hitler's holiday town. You know, it's actually one of the most beautiful places that I've ever lived in my life. So I was programmed by my upbringing. I was part programmed or majorly programmed by white society. Then I lived for 20 years in Germany, so I kind of adopted their programming, and then my mum got ill. I recovered my relationship with my mother. I came to the island where I am now, which is the island of Nevis in the Caribbean, and I hated it because of this programming, this paradigm that was running around in my head, not thinking that I was white, but I was thinking that I was better than everybody else. But then what happened, you know, and please don't judge me for this. Then what happened was I started to integrate with my culture. I could feel my Nigerian roots, you know, this very sort of industrious, powerful side to me. I could feel the more jovial, fun side of me that comes, I believe, from the West Indian culture. So it's about connectivity. And now there has been a complete shift in my mindset, even in my business. Most of my clients are Black. And why? Because I've taken the programming, I've taken the lessons that I've learned that, let's say, from white culture, westernized culture, and I'm bringing that to help people to thrive. So all of my clients that I've been, let's say, coaching over the last 2 years, they are all stepping up and they're realizing that they have to get rid of this victim mentality, you know, I'm here to serve. Or on the other side, it's almost like people say, you know, well, you know, I don't like being what I am, but I'm here to serve. And that's what we have to to drop and forget. I've worked for, you know, some major companies in Germany, in Austria, in Russia as well. And I want to bring that back and show people that they can be whatever they want to be, as long as they change their mindset, as long as they connect with their identity and stop playing. I'm sorry, I mean, this is going to be controversial, and stop being the victim, because we have a tendency to default to a victim mentality. When we say that we can be what we want to be, that's when we start to move forwards. And I believe that I am the living proof of that. Please don't judge me on the way that I speak and the way that I sound. That's just how I was brought up. But I am totally invested in my culture, and I want my culture to do better than it's doing now. Collaborate and not compete. I love the message of what somebody was saying earlier on, and that's why I stayed in the room. I just came on to have a listen, but this has really hooked me in, and it's inspired me, and it's incentivized me to do even better than what I'm doing right now for our people. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Wilson. You are a star. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. As we move towards the conclusion of the conversation, because really this has been on fire, and I thank each and every one of you for your contribution. This is highly valuable. We need it. We need it. We need it to be able to reposition and recalibrate ourselves in where we are going. It is called collective narrative with our story. If it is just my story, then we can call that collective. If it is just my point of view, then it is not collective. It is collective because we have all of us putting in our input, and it becomes more beautiful, more enriching, and more powerful, and also more resourceful. So I want to thank each and every one of you again. Now, before we move into the concluding part where each of us is going to leave the last contribution, I want to say this. I think the better way for us to serve here is that we need to look at Africa and the African diaspora as our own. We need to look at the problem there as opportunity for us to serve. And each of us is therefore called upon to offer something as a solution to the problem. So what are we bringing as a solution to solve this problem? Because this is our problem. Having said that, what is going to be your final thought here? I want to start with Reverend Gloria. We have really had a very powerful conversation. So what is your final thought here to conclude it?
Well, Brother Obehi, thank you. I feel as if I haven't had an opportunity to jump in. I had so much to say in response to everything that was said, but it was amazing um, to be a part of the conversation and listen to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Ava, for your passionate contribution. And it's strange, even though you had said you were going to be a disruptor, and I could hear the pain and the frustration and all the things that many of us feel. I could also hear the love. It was coming from a place of love. What you want for your people, what you want, is that love you have. That what was coming out in a lot of what you're saying. That's what I picked up. And I think the most important thing for me in all of it was two or three things can be true at the same time. I recall, when I went home to Nigeria, I'm Nigerian. I went home to Nigeria last year, and I sat and watched my husband and his friends, they're lawyers, doctors, all professionals, as they ate, fufu from with their hands, and they were talking politics and just what you were saying about all the things that are wrong with the country, and why we're not getting up, and that we have to have a revolution, and you know and I was thinking to myself, wow, who is going to do this work? Because I'm leaving the country back to the UK, in a little while. These people have stayed back, and they're trying to make a difference. And I think that's what we're trying to do in our own little ways, in these spaces that we create, and we, all telling our stories, and being authentic in what our experiences are. I mean, today I'm saying all these things, of how we can try to create a different mindset, to take our lives and our people forward. Tomorrow I'll be in a different space, and I'll be speaking almost exactly like you, Dr. Ava. So two or three things can be true at the same time, and so in the sake for the sake of time, I'll just try to pull it all together. Now, as we look to the future, the stories we tell today will shape the world of tomorrow. By building collective narratives rooted in our shared history, culture, and spirituality, we can empower future generations to embrace their identities with pride and confidence. I mean, I know when I first started doing this work as an ancestral lineage healing practitioner, being an ordained minister, I got so much resistance and hostility from my own people, who felt I was doing, quote unquote, the devil's work. And it was the white people who flooded my DM, who all wanted to learn about. And I was thinking to myself, no, no, I've done the work with you guys. I've worked here as a therapist, blah blah blah, but I want to do this work with my people. But having said that, I was also frustrated and angry that the people who, for me, should just automatically understand this work, it's in our DNA. They are the ones who were literally trying to bring me down. And it did make me hesitate. It did make me unsure. I wouldn't step into the work fully. So I wasn't able to do the work. But from the minute I said no, my people, my ancestors are telling me uh, I don't have a choice. I've been called to do this work. From the minute I embraced it, the doors opened. And even the people who um, more or less cut me off, I now see them in my social media places, following me, and I'm thinking, oh, that's Sister Margaret who was saying all these things 2 weeks ago. Oh, that's Sister Augusta who is following me, and I think somebody just said to me before, do what you are meant to do what you're called to do, and the rest will take care of itself. So that's what I'm focused on now. Storytelling is a tool for transformation. It allows us to reimagine our past, reclaim our present, and reshape our future. For the African diaspora, this means telling stories that celebrate our resilience, honor our ancestors, and envisage a future where our contributions are recognized, our cultures are celebrated, and our identities are fully embraced. We need to remain unapologetically authentic. Let us use the power of storytelling to build a future where the African diaspora is united in our diversity, strong in its identity, and healed from the wounds of the past. Thank you all for your presence. Thank you all who have remained to the end. I always say, even those who don't actually speak, you are speaking by being here, by your energy, and by the love that you show. Thank you all, and God bless you all.
Reverend Gloria, I appreciate you. I appreciate that value. That is highly appreciated. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. All right. So because Dr. Eva, you're still there, I would like you to say a final word there. But before then, I'd like to confirm what Reverend Gloria said, and also a confirmation of what you said, that sometimes we have this little nugget, bad one coming within the community. You see, before I married my wife, most of the things I was doing was not really among the African people. Even though I was working as an African person, most of my research is about the African, because when I organize events, they don't come. That is true. The people that are buying my books, they are not Africans, you see. So the people that are actually patronizing me in terms of giving me money for what I'm doing, I'm really telling you the truth, are Italian. So that when I write my book, I need to translate it to Italian. I keep the English version just there for fancy. I mean, within the area here, of course, on the internet, that is a different story. But when I organize event, because I organize event both at the university, cultural center, in primary school to talk, but they will not come. But what I've come to understand is that, of course, when I got married to my wife, then my wife was sort of insisting, okay, these are your people and all of that. Then I started to open up more to that. So that most of my book that I've written before, after them, it's only really now that I'm translating into Italian, and it's only now I'm developing a marketing strategy to take it like I did before, to take it into the Italian community and promote it. And I know that they are going to buy. Whereas my people have printed just, I think, about 100 copies of the English version. None of them buy. I leave it there. Sometimes they will even tell me, give it to me for free, you know. So I understand what is happening here. But I want to repeat again that it is our job to fix this, because as entrepreneur, the problem is for us as opportunity to solve. So I think that is how I'm going to be looking at that. So what is your final take here, Dr. Eva? And thank you so much for being here.
My final, I'm actually in the office packing hurricane food for victims. So I lived in the UK, as you guys probably know, and I woke up this morning. I still live in the UK, and I spend more time in Jamaica. So I'm near to you, Winston. Is it Wilson in some respect? And I woke up this morning seeing the headlines that the carnival, Notting Hill Carnival, and Reverend Gloria, I haven't got my glasses on, I can't see very well. Reverend Gloria would know this. Carnival made $396 million this weekend for the UK. But only last week we had the disruption around race and all of that. And Carnival is such a powerful example of Caribbean nations coming together and all other people in the UK, because it's not just Caribbean, because Carnival is a Caribbean thing, but it's everybody who comes together, and mainly people of color. And Carnival is a stark example of what we can achieve if we band heads together. So yes, you're right. that I am passionate about my nation. I'm passionate about my people. I have a half Nigerian son. Some of you know this. But again, I just think like Wilson said, we need to stop. We need to just stop the 1 second. I'm coming. Just stay right there. I'm coming. We need to stop the blame and now look at and stop using the example and making excuses and move forward. That's my final take. And for me personally, in terms of how I contribute, I mentor a lot of young girls. I'm passionate about young girls. So I give back by mentorship. I mentor a lot of young girls in different NGOs across the world. I adopt a child in Zambia. I pay for her to go to school. I don't talk about these things. You guys never heard this before. So I contribute to my part. I love my people, love my color, but I really want us to see us do better. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eva. You're a star. I appreciate you. Thank you. Let's move to Dr. Matsiade. To you, we say you are the last speaker today. So, Dr. Matsia, what is your final take here? And please remember to tell the people how to find your beautiful work.
Okay, so they can find me. I'm promoting a leader like you and lessons learned from COVID anthology. We are encouraging you to continue to buy. And I have my Leader Up program, my Pivot with Power program, and my Empower Her program. You can go to my website at drtpmotivate2.com to see how you can benefit from those programs. I want to end by saying we must be the change that we want. And I also want to say that my experience has been that I have had a balanced mix of different persons from different races accessing my services, because it really goes by need, and I am happy that I have met those objective and open persons from the different races and also my race, because there are persons out there who are willing to collaborate and not compete, and they are not in the minority as we may think. They are a large group. It's not as small as we think. What we have to do is to make sure that we show ourselves as collaborators, and so the collaborators are attracted to us, and we must equip ourselves to identify the collaborators so that we fit into them, because the more we collaborate is the more power, as Dr. Eva said in Carnival, with the Carnival example that I was in fact going to use, is the more we collaborate is the more power we give ourselves to become our best selves and to become the masters of our own destiny and to show up unapologetically. We must also start a crusade in getting persons to change how they see themselves and the world, because the war is really in the mind. And if our minds are defeated, then we are fighting a losing battle when we try to engage persons who really have eyes but they cannot see. I am also finding that if we focus more on the people and not the benefits, a lot of us drive benefits and how we can. There is a wave, a strong wave, a heat wave that we must be rich. We see it in the movies, we see it in the books, we see it how we can market ourselves to become six figure this and six figure that. And because of that, we tend to have a mentality where we press into people to get from them what they have instead of building them to continually sustain the collaborative mission and also the collaborative message. We do it unconsciously many times because we have to get ahead and our bills have to be paid, but we must know engage persons meaningfully. We must connect, and in that connection everyone must strive and everyone must survive. That's where I'm ending. Thank you so much, Obi, for having me join you every other Monday, and for the ways I am benefiting from the rich discourses and discussion and the food that I get for thought to improve my own practice and my own actions, my own habits, my own routines, and my own embracing of those who are like me and who want to be better than they were yesterday. Thank you so much.
Dr. Matsia, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your contribution and also your consistency here. We value that so much. Thank you. All right, Mr. Wilson, what would be your final thought here, and let the people also know how to find you?
Okay, so people can find me here. I don't actually have a website. I've never had a website. um, so people can find me here on LinkedIn, and I respond to them that way. Um, my final thought from all of this is that there really does need to be a mindset shift in our people. We've got to stop competing and start collaborating within our own community. Even yesterday, I was sitting with a young man who I've been working with, and I can see how he is cleaving to his programming here on this island, which is keeping him small. The guy is super intelligent, he's super smart, but he's keeping himself small. And, we are the sum of our thoughts, aren't we? So I think that the bigger question is, and I think we should create a think tank, because we're good at saying we need to do this, we need to do that. We're good at saying that. But what needs to happen in order for us to bring that into reality? What action steps can we take as thought leaders? Because everybody in this room, in this event, is a thought leader. What can we actually physically do, and what are we prepared to do to help our people? I've got 3 people off this 36 square mile island, and I've sent them. Oh, in fact, I haven't sent them. They did it themselves. They've gone to America, Austin, Texas, on university scholarship courses to better themselves. So that gives them better opportunities. So I believe that what I'm doing is creating beauty, it's creating harmony, and it's creating a better space for us as people. It's generational. We need to get in the schools. We need to start working with younger people to get them to change their mindsets and develop good, positive ways about themselves and also their identity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Wilson. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you also for the good work that you are doing there and the impact you are making in the life of the people. And of course, thanks to all the speakers here, we appreciate the contribution that you have brought here and the food that you have brought for people to be able to reflect. And we deeply appreciate that. And I think this is what it's all about. Because now you have refined yourself. When we are born, we are literally crude. Even though sometimes we pass through educational system that sort of tend to crush us, but we can see that because we are human beings sometimes, there are times, even though it might be very challenging for us, we might have the chance to be able to fall out of the program and able to be of a resource for other people. When you look at other people now, looking at maybe the African diaspora or maybe Africa, I wanted to see them as people that need our help, not from the point of view of attack, but from the point of view of, okay, maybe I can do something to help 1 or 2. If 1 or 2 is what we are able to help, I think that can be enough for now. You necessarily might not be able to help everybody. Maybe if you're able to help 1 or 2 persons, that is all you can do, and that is good enough. And now look at it. We're talking about story. We're talking about people who have been able to find their way out and then sharing the way out to other people. That is a good thing. If we are doing that, I think we should be happy that we are making a serious contribution. As for the faith of this continent and us as a people, I believe so much that we're going to get it right. It's probably going to take us some time, but we're going to get it right at a point. Many of us, millions of us as a people, we are traumatized. Our operation, the way we behave, the way we comport, including also our politicians, is a sign that something is terribly wrong with us. It is not natural. So whatever we are seeing is a manifestation of what has happened to us. So we don't need to make the conclusion yet. Let's see what we can do to continue to heal. We are in the period of trying to heal ourselves. It is not normal. It is not normal what is going on. It is not normal the backbiting, the inability of us to trust each other. There is nothing normal about it. It is not the way of life of a people. It is because we are responding to something that have happened to us. Maybe if we understand that thing that have happened to us, maybe we'll be able to find a way out. So I want to thank all of you again for your contribution. And I invite you to join us again 14 days from now, because every 14 days we are opening this conversation where we talk about storytelling for African diaspora. We are looking for a way for us to be able to use storytelling as a tool to heal ourselves and to build us up, because we believe storytelling is such a powerful weapon that we can use for us. So thank everyone again. And from here, I'm signing out. Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye from here.